Welcome to Cafecito y Calidad. I'm your host, Elizabeth Sanchez, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified coffee enthusiast. Whether we're catching up with friends, studying for a big exam, or grounding with a little caffeinated cozy goodness, coffee brings us together, it powers us up, and it gives us a reason to sit down and connect. Each week, I'll be sitting down with an inspiring entrepreneur to discuss their journey towards building successful businesses and the mental wellness tools they use to alleviate burnout. But first, let's take a sip of something warm and comforting, shall we? You all probably know by now, I'm a first-generation Latina entrepreneur who is a big supporter of women-owned businesses. This is why finding El Cielito was such a special discovery for me. This online coffee company is led by the inspiring, warm-hearted, and hilarious social media star Daniel Oliveras, and they specialize in crafting delicious roasts using coffee beans from women-owned farms in Latin America. So why not try something new and support a great cause? Order from El Cielito online coffee company today. Welcome back to Cafecito y Calidad. I'm your host, Elizabeth Sanchez, licensed marriage and family therapist. On season 2 of Cafecito y Calidad, we'll be interviewing influential entrepreneurs and we'll be discussing the mental wellness tools they use to alleviate burnout. On today's episode, we have a fellow coffee enthusiast and he owns a successful coffee company. Let's give a warm welcome to Daniel from El Cielito Coffee. What's up, Daniel?
What's up? What's up?
What's up? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, Daniel, before we get into all the deep stuff today, how do you take your coffee?
Black, all the way. When I'm
Ah,
feeling fancy, a cortadito with oat milk. But,
Híjole.
but
Rico.
yeah, but black for sure. Yeah.
I've been a huge fan of yours ever since I found you on Instagram and TikTok. The story behind your coffee company is really inspiring, and I'm excited for our audience to get to know who you are and what inspired you to start this.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. Coffee is it's something that's ingrained in the history of Latinos. It was brought to us in the time of colonization. So as the time of the new chapter that came about with Latino America came about coffee this whole time. I just wanted to reclaim that coffee so it didn't have that bad history to it. Coffee is it was definitely a wild ride. I grew up in Echo Park. I grew up as a boxer. My dad had me in boxing. You know, as a Latino, being the first son, whatever my dad
Ah.
dreamt of being, that's what I became. And
Mm.
so, and so I was into boxing. I was always in the community centers. Echo Park was a low to low middle income neighborhood. And so I was always in the neighborhood. And then I realized the neighborhood started changing. And as it was changing through coffee shops. So once I graduated high school and that change became more apparent, I realized like, okay, these coffee shops aren't going anywhere. I might as well check them out and see what's going on. I would see that these coffee shops were not owned by Latinos, but everything that they provided and offered to the community was Latino. They had Guatemala coffee, El Salvador coffee, coffee de Mexico, latte españoles, like mocha mexicanos. And it's just like, well, I don't see any Latinos around, and what really irked me was like they had like these like kind of like cute names for them, like not cute names to us, but like kind of cute pet names for them. Like they would call Guatemala like Guats, and it just felt so wrong to me. So obviously I didn't really know coffee that well growing up. I just knew, boxers. So I would go back to my friends and be like, hey, did you know El Salvador grew coffee or Guatemala grew coffee? And they're just like, duh, bro. Like, like we grew up in the fincas, we grew up like that's our whole like being and what we know. So I was like, okay, I might be onto something where there needs to be coffee shops owned by Latinos, and not just owned by it, but that needs to be put in the forefront that like, hey, we produce this, we make this, we sacrifice, ourselves for it. Our countries are getting, basically like bankrupt because of this. Like we need to like put this in our name. We need to offer it to the people. We need to tell them like this is where we're from and we need to benefit from that. So then came the other chapter of how am I gonna do this, right? Like how am I gonna have the coffee shop and how am I gonna um like basically bring my idea to life, which is always the hardest part. It's always easy to think it up, but it's never easy to really put it into motion. So at that time I was going to Cal State LA. I was boxing for them. I was boxing outside in the amateur leagues as well. And I was helping my dad out at his mechanic shop. And so my hands were full. and I was like, I need to do this for me, and I need to do this, for my people. So so I saved up money. I saved up boxing money. I saved up my FAFSA money that should have went towards books. I saved that up. I saved whatever I could, and then I started looking for a location. So the location that I found was in Southeast LA in Southgate. And the reason why I chose that was because that felt like a second home to me, because there's a lot of boxing gyms out there. We would spar in Maywood, where my coffee shop originally was in Southgate. I got beat up in that area from fighting, so I have some nice memories there, I guess. I know what it feels like to take a beating around there. And so I started the shop, and I was like, I need to see what I can do, and how I can bring this about. So I opened the shop, and I was like completely like no money. I had nothing at all. There was a Burger King across the street, and I was living off of chicken nuggets. So just like eating those dollar chicken nuggets every day. And then I couldn't run the shop and then box and then still attend college. So the first thing I did was drop out of college and be like, okay, well, maybe boxing will pay off. And then boxing started going really bad because apparently you can't exercise off chicken nuggets. so, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna stop boxing, and then I dedicated fully to the coffee shop. And the trouble was that creating my own recipes, buying coffee like where I can buy it from, because I didn't have money, and see what I can offer to the people around me. um I was not welcomed at first, and I don't blame them. I mean, they already had seen what happened to Echo Park with the coffee shops, and coffee shops become a pond for gentrification. Because I mean, if you have the kind of money to spend, like, $7 $8 a cup every day, like, you obviously have some disposable income. And so I figured, like, okay, I got to solve all these issues, issues that I never really, foresaw, and realized what was going to happen. I just thought, I'm going to open up a shop and I'm going to be the next Jeff Bezos, like, it's going to happen that way. And it didn't. And so through these kind of channels and problems I had to solve, I realized a lot. I realized there was a community that needed help. There was just like other businesses that they didn't really care about the community at all. They Some of them were even poison to the community, if I could say, liquor shops and things of that sort. And then so that was one issue I had to solve. The other one was figuring out the whole coffee game, because I was like, I have my shop now. Now how am I gonna put everything to the front when it comes to representing Latinos? And then thirdly, I couldn't cook at all. I mean, I couldn't do anything. Again, being a Latino, and my mom cooked a lot of my food and stuff, so I didn't really know how to whip up recipes.
Same.
Yeah, so I didn't really know how to do anything. And so I started trying to figure out my recipes. I did that, and then people were coming in, and so I started making money to buy coffee. And then that's where that whole issue came about, where so basically you buy this coffee from like these bodegas, right? From these warehouses, and they import the coffee in, and then you just buy it from them, and then you just take your coffee and you be on your merry way. But these bodegas, obviously, like, they have to cut a lot of costs in order for them to make money. So there's so many middlemen in coffee that ultimately the person who gets screwed over is the farmer, which is the Latino that I'm trying to help. So I started putting out words like, hey, like, if your family owns a shop, like a farm, or if your family or if you know of anybody that owns a farm, like, hit me up. Like, I don't have any importing connections, but we'll make it poppin'. The first person that came up to me, his name was is Ernesto, and that was just like wild. So I get to my shop, and he's just like waiting outside, and I'm like, oh my god. And it's like this dude looks like the Latino Paul Walker. So I was just like, oh man, this dude's gonna try and offer to buy out my shop or something, like, I'm, oh man. So so I started talking to him a little bit, and he starts talking to me about how his dad owns a farm in Nicaragua, and that they're like on the brink of like losing that farm because of like the whole politics and banks and stuff. And he was like, I want to, like, I'll figure out how to import it if you could figure out how to just keep buying from me. And I was like, it's done deal. So I started working with him, and then that became like the first like official Cielito like direct like farm to cup situation. And so I started putting it out there like, hey, we work directly with the farmers, and then that attracted more people. Were like, hey, my dad owns a farm, or like they're like, my family owns a farm back there, but we don't know how to figure it out. So we're just like, we'll figure it out together. So then we got Juan and Linda from Cafe Wayua. They're from El Salvador. So then they brought in the coffee, and we started working with them. And then we had Kenny, who he had a business partner in Guatemala who was able to import it. So then we started using his importing. Like everything just started connecting. And then we were really able to be like, okay, this is truly 100% Latino. So we were able to switch off like from those bodegas to like ensuring that, I think the biggest one that we had was the Costa Rica one, and that was like ensuring that like 80% of the farmers got the money that was like in part of the transaction.
Daniel, can we show the bag that
Oh
you
yeah,
brought?
definitely.
Because we're actually talking about the Costa Rica
Yeah,
farms, right?
definitely. So that one, yeah, and that one's my favorite because
You want to show it off?
yeah,
There you
definitely.
go.
So it's exclusively women owned farm. So there's a program in Costa Rica, and they're called Bean Voyage. And I messaged them because it's a super awesome program where they help teach women farmers of Costa Rica how to grow coffee, how to excel in like a male dominated obviously industry. And they never exported out of Costa Rica before. So I was like, I'm gonna figure it out and we're gonna get your coffee here. So I got like emails and like WhatsApp messages from like the women farmers, like muchas gracias. And I'm like, oh, that's crazy, that's awesome. And like me being like, obviously, so there's me and my brothers and my sisters, but everyone was always working. So I just grew up in a Latina household. So like obviously supporting Latinas was like a really big deal for me because I'm just like, oh, that's awesome. So then yeah, we started working with them. We ensured that 80% of the money went to the farmers, and that program, and that helped them obviously like fund the teaching, and like yeah, the teaching of the growing methods, the picking methods, the processing methods, all of that fun stuff. And that was like my pride and joy from there. And then yeah, and then well, obviously the obvious happened with COVID hit, and then my shop went from like up to like really, really, really low, like upwards trajectory to all the way towards down. And I was just like, you know what, like, and that was the blessing and kind of the curse of the whole situation. Cause I was like, okay, I'm taking care of people, but then when things start going downwards, you're like, I have people to take care of. And so that started taking a toll. And then my son had just been born, so then I was like, oh man, like losing the shop, and my son was born. And then the Burger King that supplied me with so many chicken nuggets got bought out by Starbucks, and I was like,
No.
"Oh man!" I was like, "Whatever, whoever put a curse on me, bro, I'm sorry." But it was just so much that had like happened so fast. And then there was other problems going on with like the building managers and the building situation. So then I was just like, you know what, sometimes you can't really ride on emotions, you just have to cut your losses when they're there. And so I cut those losses, and then there came another point in my life where I was like, all right, now I have to figure out how to sustain Cielito, because the Cielito was the shop. And then how to be able to take care of the coffee farmers when I'm not obviously making as much income as I was before, and then obviously figure out how to be a dad.
Yeah, Daniel, I think, can we pause there? I had a question for you around that.
Yeah.
Um, because that's a lot. I'm a mom too. I had a baby during the pandemic. So that in itself is a lot. Then your shop, closed, the pandemic. What were some of the things, I know you said I had to cut my losses, but what were some of the things that really helped you get through that? Those are a lot of stressors.
Yeah, no, they were
Yeah.
yeah, and it all came just like that. And
Yeah.
a lot of it well, I really like to credit to my like boxing background, cuz I mean, I used to tell myself, I was like, I used to get punched in the face a lot. If that doesn't deter me, I don't know. Well, I also used to tell myself when I would go and do sales, right? I'd be like, I used to I would tell myself like, I got punched in the face before by hard hitters. What's a no to me, right? Like, a no doesn't hurt as much. I can tell you that. And so yeah, so when it came to that, it was just like there was that stressor. And then there was the obviously my son being born, and then just trying to figure out the next thing. So a lot of it was like I went back to boxing, like trying to amp myself up, at least build back my self-confidence. And then try to get rid of that chicken nugget body for sure.
Hey.
And then another thing was just trying like just really sit and reflect. Like I'm someone who like I can't be sitting for so long. Like that was another problem with me in school. Like I have to be active and I have to be like, as you can tell right now, I'm super fidgety either way. But
It's not just the
it's
coffee?
not just the coffee, yo. No, no, no. So then like yeah, like I have to be doing something. So and then seeing my dad worked like 11, 12 hours. Like he owned his own business, but he's always the kind of person like it's like I have to do it or else no one else does it right. So my dad like it's like kind of enslaved himself in his own business. So seeing my dad work like all the time, obviously I was just like, all right, I need to work. Like just recently, just self-reflecting, I was like, I realized that I put my value to like, my like how much output I put in work. So when I wasn't fighting, I just felt like really low. When I wasn't working, I just felt like fidgety. I'm like, oh, I don't have any value right now. I'm holding people back. So I had to sit and reflect and allow like, hey, like it's okay to not work. It's okay to enjoy life. And it's something I'm still working on, but like what really helped me a lot, and it's gonna sound really cheesy, but like holding my son, like it was just yeah, it was just wild. It'd be
That's
like
best friend.
yeah, it'd be like 1 in the morning and I'm just holding him and I'm just like, oh man, like like it's I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna take care of him. I got show him the
Yeah. Doesn't it
yeah.
give a different like purpose to life, right? The
Oh yeah,
different ppurpose, a different drive that you have this little human being. As an
definitely.
entrepreneur myself, right? Like you feel that like it's not just about me anymore.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It's so wild because it's like I can't talk about him without like wanting to cry. Like it's every time. Like
How old is he, Daniel?
he turned 4 on the 10th.
Oh,
Yeah. So
wow.
I'm just like, yeah, every time like people always ask about him and I'm just like I'm talking and then I'm like I'm going to shut up now cuz I'm going to cry, bro. Like I'm not, you know,
It seems like he really brings out that side of you that, more vulnerable, more vulnerable side of
yeah,
you.
oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Like I make like I'd never said the word like cute before. Now I'm just like, oh, it's so cute, like and then it's just like, yeah, it's like that it also brought out like the teacher in me. Like I again like my dad was always like very because he was my boxing coach and then obviously like dad at home, strict dad. So like I never really had the confidence to be a teacher myself. Like I was never given that opportunity. So like with having my son, like it built my confidence, like, oh, I can teach, I can be gentle, I can grow. And yeah, with my son, I really it really brought out like all like the vulnerabilities in me. Like I cry all the time. Like the first night when we brought him home and I didn't sleep at all. Like I just watched him sleep and I'm just like, oh my God, like that's my son,
You made that.
Yeah, yeah. I was just like, oh, that's my son, and I'm just like, oh, like, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna do it? But like in like not a worried way. It was just like a way where I'm just like, oh, like this is like this is it. This is me now. And so like he's been like my motivation like all the time. Like when I'm boxing, obviously you go through like stuff where it's just like, oh, I don't think I could go another round or you're pretty beat up and I'm just like, man, what if like what am I gonna tell him like my son? Like I'm gonna tell him like, I was tired as hell, but the fifth round I was going at it, and then I recently signed back up for school, like, just to like work on some stuff, and I'm just like, I don't want to, I don't have time, but I mean, it's be cool to graduate and tell my son like, hey, I did it, it's possible. So that's fun.
Daniel, would you say, because I know from in one of my episodes with and on our podcast, I talk about my son as well, and he's helped me as well. Like being a mom has taught me even more about being an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
like patience, ways of avoiding burnout. Like he really has me slow down. Like when like I don't know, there's just something about parenthood that has taught me it aligns with it. So I don't know. I don't know if you can speak around that, like how becoming a father, even boxing and owning your own coffee shop has really like all tied in together.
Yeah, definitely. So like the boxing thing, so boxing, I started it when I was 7. My dad was a boxer in Guadalajara, and then he came here, and then he was still boxing, and then he had my sister, and then me, and then he's like, all right, with two kids, I can't balance everything. So boxing was the last one to go, well, the first one to go. And so yeah, with that, like he taught me lessons through there, and it also took me being a father to realize what my dad was teaching me. My dad didn't have a very good example of a father when he was growing up. So um looking back at it now, I'm just like, he did a great job, from what he knew and what he had. And again, it took me being a father to know that. And so when he would teach me boxing, and we would go to the gym. It was literally, I would except for elementary, but I would run before school, go to school, and then go to the gym, and then have like an hour to, like, I guess, play PlayStation before I went to sleep. I was supposed to be doing homework, but but yeah, so then I was talking to my dad, and that's another thing where as Latino opening up, it's a big one. So I was talking to my dad. I was just telling him how grateful I am for him and how grateful I was for him, and everything he taught me. And he had told me that, like, that was all he knew, like boxing was all he knew and all he wanted to be. And so growing up, I was just like, oh man, like I just thought he was just like, oh, like he wanted me to be a boxing champion because that's what he wanted to be. But he was just telling me that, like, he wanted that for me because he wanted me to be confident, and I was like, man, like, what, like, it takes a while for everything to come to light, right? And so and that's what did end up happening with boxing. Like, and I tell everyone, like, I'm an extremely shy person. Like, I'm super shy. And so, like, boxing kind of doesn't allow you to be shy. You're up there fighting some dude you don't know in front of people you don't know, and like when you weigh in, you're in your boxers in front of people you don't know. They're also, it's a wild situation that you can't be shy in. So that kind of that spilled into the entrepreneurship, where I'm just like, okay, like, I can't, like, I'm shy right now, but I mean, if I'm gonna be shy and I'm gonna be hesitant, just like boxing, when you're hesitant throwing a punch, that's when people get you. So with entrepreneurship, it's like, if you're shy and hesitant, then you're gonna lose this opportunity. You're gonna lose the opportunity to throw that jab, or the opportunity to throw that right hand and land it. So that's how that spilled into that. The days where I was just surviving off chicken nuggets, well, boxing has a very strict diet. So I mean, chicken nuggets was better than nothing. Like, in boxing, we would stop eating. We would fight on Sunday, so we would stop eating and drinking on Friday night. Like, no water, anything for like the rest of that. So I was like, when I was broke, I was like, there's nothing, and then that helped into that. And then, against the whole confidence builder, the whole like, boxing also gives you like a positive outlook, despite what kind of like doom is kind of lingering, because, like, you're walking to the ring against again, and you're training, well, you're fighting against someone who's literally training, like, his sole purpose, dedication, was to, like, beat you up. Like, he doesn't have want to have a conversation with you. Like, you have to take that slow walk up there to meet the person who's been starving starving himself, who's been just depriving himself of social time. Like, it's intense. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's like, okay, like, you're heading into the abyss, but, like, you can't be scared. You have to hit it to the forefront, because even though all these odds are against you, like, once you get, like, the ball rolling and you get confidence and you start feeling things, like, you can you can win.
So Daniel, using that metaphor of the boxing, I just recently started. Oh,
Okay.
and I use it to avoid burnout with
Yeah.
all the work that I do. But who do you think? So if we use that metaphor, the boxing metaphor, to talk about your journey with your coffee company, who's been your opponent? Like, what are some of the things that you've like who have come at you? Like, maybe some of the challenges that have come at you.
Oh,
Yeah.
a lot. I mean, the first thing was financial. The second thing was planning the business without, like, kind of, I jumped from, from the frying pan into the fryer, where I didn't finish school, so I didn't know, like, anything about business. I just thought, I'm gonna do this, open up, and let's see what's happening. Because my dad did the same thing. He was like, I'm gonna open up a mechanic shop and see what happens. So I was like, okay, well, I could do that. So then my biggest opponent was that as well. And another thing was also, like, my age was a factor in the sense where usually in boxing, age is a good thing. The younger you are, the fresher you are. You know, but in the lack of experience, it was what got me. I was a young kid when I started Cielito. I think I was 20 going on 21. So I was just like, I thought I knew everything, and stuff. So then I was there, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to get my permits. I didn't know how to let's see what else, pay bills. Like, I didn't know how to like manage.
Open a bank account.
Yeah, open a bank account. I remember I had when I had gone to the bank. It's a good thing you brought that up. So I go to the bank and I'm just like, hey, I want to open a business account. And the lady was like, oh, okay, what kind of business are you planning on opening? I'm like, oh, a coffee shop and blah, blah, blah. And then she was just like spinning like all this like jargon and terminology like business, like, oh, so you must know that the profit margin was this. And I'm like, totally. Yeah, I know exactly what that is. And then I went home and I was just like, what does it mean? Like, I was
Writing it
just,
down.
yeah,
Writing it down.
I was just like, let's see, profit margin, stuff like that. And I was like, oh man. And so there was that. And then there was also like another thing that kind of comes into it is race, like
I was gonna ask that.
yeah, like the coffee world is dominated by, and it's mostly by whites or Koreans. And they're not only do they have that like on their side in the sense of like the race situation, but like they also come from money. Like a lot of people that I met, they were just like, oh yeah, like my dad just like he's just giving me money. I'm like, okay, cool. And then they're just like, oh, well, my dad, owns like all these businesses and stuff like that. And this is just like a side project for us. And I'm like, oh, that's nice, you know?
So you came across a lot of privilege.
Yeah, a lot. And there's a lot. And then the thing is that they kind of came across as someone without like privilege, but then that was another situation on my part. It was a lack of experience where like growing up where I come from, like if you saw like a really expensive car, it was like a UFO, and you saw the guy step out of that car and he had like really nice clothes on, chains and all this stuff. And then obviously in the boxing world as well, like they all had chains and Mike Tyson and pet tigers and stuff, you know. So then when I would see these people and they were dressed like I was just like, oh, these guys are where I'm from. But then they have the comfort of dressing like that because they want to, they have the comfort looking like that because they want to, like I finally have the comfort of having a bad hair day. So so like you start like seeing that, and I would for sure see that. And they talk about these kinds of things, and they did go to like UCLA business school and stuff like that. And then they used words that banker lady told me, and I'm just like, I know that word. And and yeah, so stuff like that. And then the other one was also it was like this combination of like my age, the race, and then just like where I come from. There was this one time, and I'll never forget it. I used to try and open up accounts like to roast for other people, like supply coffee shops. So some of them were hits, some of them were misses. Again, I didn't have the experience of how like strategize it. So what I would do is I would take a night and just go on Yelp and write like all these coffee shops that I see and like that were within kind of the same area, and then just go hit them all at once. Like close the shop for a day and just go and hit them. And I was venturing out more and more further into West Hollywood, and this like there's this small little coffee shop that I saw, and there was like two Lamborghinis up front. And I was just like, oh man, like that must be nice. So I walk in and the guy's there and like behind the counter, and I'm just like, hey, I just hand him the bag, and I'm just like, I'm a roaster, I'm trying to do the whole pitch, I roast Latino coffee, it's directly from the farm, blah 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 blah. And the guy just goes like, he's like, how old are you? And then I'm like, oh, I'm 21. And then he just goes, oh, okay, well that's cool. And I was 21. He was just like, I was partying in college, and I was like, oh, congratulations, bro, must be nice. And then he was just like, oh, so like, he's like, where you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm from Echo Park. And then he just goes, are you Filipino? And I was like, no, I'm Latino. And then he just goes, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure. Well, yeah. And so he just goes, okay, cool. He goes, Latinos are kind of cool, I guess. And I was like, well, what the, like straight up, like straight, like, that. Yeah.
No.
And then he looks at it and it says like where it's from. And then, and he looks at it and he goes, oh, your shop's in Southgate. Yeah. And I was like, yeah. And then he goes, so your shop's in Southgate and you're from Echo Park, and those areas are kind of like, ugh. And I was like, where are you getting at, bro? And then he just like throws the coffee like back on the counter, and then he was just like, you don't belong here. And I was like, oh, and I was just like, man, I don't know if I should like punch or like cry or like punch and cry in the car.
Do both.
You know,
Oh,
yeah. And
wow, Daniel.
I was like, man, like it was just so crazy. And I remember getting back into my car and I was just like, what am I doing, And it was so crazy because it's just like you get hit with that where it's just like, you get knocked down and you're just like, oh man, like this really happened, bro. Like I thought, I knew it all. I thought I was invincible. I thought, I was cool. I thought I was pretty friendly. And just like that, like that left hook came out of nowhere, you know? So then I get back to my shop and I'm just sitting there and I'm just trying to regroup and I'm just like, man, like the whole time I was like, well, what am I doing, And I stopped doing the sales for a bit and then I went back to it and then I just like had to like you have to kind of like I guess like reel yourself back like cuz then after that I was trying to approach everything with anger. I was just like, man, like, screw that guy, like I'm going to prove him wrong, but then I was missing out on key elements, I wasn't thinking just, just like boxing, you can't go in angry because then you're not going to think and the strategy goes out the window. So I had faced that and then I had faced um
Daniel, take me back to that. You left that coffee shop. Like, what was your thought process in the car? Like, because I'm feeling really emotional just hearing your story because I can relate.
yeah.
But what was your thought process? Like,
It was just yeah, I was just frustrated. I was angry. I was just like, man, cuz the thing was it's like the thing that hurts you the most is like that hurt me the most at the time was that hit me where I was most prideful, like it wasn't just like an attack on me, like it was just like, hey bro, like your ears are big. I would have been like, all right, it was just something where it was just like this guy just hit everything, like he like he said that I didn't belong there. He said the neighborhood where I'm from isn't worth anything. The neighborhood that I invested in wasn't worth anything. He said that like the ethnicity that he assumed I was and the ethnicity that I am, he said there was both kind of like like there was just so much like anger that I had. And
things that were like you've been really passionate about and hold a lot of value in your life.
yeah, definitely, I mean that's all
Yeah.
I had.
That's all you had.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it was that, and there was a lot of anger. I had to just sit, regroup, just think, and just be like, all right, man, I can't let this hold me back. I had to, just regroup and just get up and just keep going. But I mean, I was angry. I hadn't been that angry in a while, but I mean, it was just it was something that
Rightfully so.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. It
man.
was something that just
Yeah.
so in like it just stayed in there. Like I remember word for word the conversation and walking back to that car, seeing the Lamborghinis, just seeing everything was just like everything. The Lamborghinis held that point because I was like, that's where I had wanted to be, like that's where it's just like, oh, that's nice, like that affordability.
It's
But
like your goal, right?
exactly, like that disposable income, that was that symbol. And so like seeing all of that kind of spit in my face was kind of like, oh man, like that's but at a point like sometimes you kind of have to think of these things kind of like again back to boxing, like in knockdowns you need them, you need that experience to be like, okay, this is what's gonna happen. You need that experience to know to duck next time. You need that experience to know like, hey, if if the fight's going this way or the conversation's going this way, you kind of want to be like, hey, bro, like I'm gonna have to stop you right there, like, like it's that kind of thing where it's just it's an experience. It sucks and it's horrible, but it's something where
And you kept going though, Daniel. I don't know if there's maybe some words of advice or some tips you would give another entrepreneur that has gone through a similar experience, because a lot of times that's all it takes, and some entrepreneurs just quit. They
yeah.
quit. They don't want to keep going. What would be some words of advice for somebody that's going through that?
Well, I would just say just just remember what you started for, Just remember why you started, remember why you took that journey and and just keep marching on. It's not going to be easy. It's going to suck and it's going to sting really bad, but you have to put yourself in the shoes of like of you when you first started, get yourself out of that fear and back into the situation where you were excited to start and just keep on marching that way. Because I mean, now you have experience, now you have even more motivation. You just use that as the fuel to your fire. There's plenty of times and plenty of people that, they faced backlash, they faced racism, they faced classism, and they kept going, and all of that is just because they were really passionate about what they wanted, what they did, and what they
Their
represented,
intention,
and their
right?
intentions.
Intention.
Yeah, and just keep on going. It's you're gonna take a couple punches to get to that championship, but I mean, being a
Yeah.
champion's cool.
So Daniel, I'm gonna actually share how. So there's a story. We had a Zoom meeting with Kai and I, right? Remember we met.
Yeah.
So I'm actually gonna, I'll share a little bit about one of my punches, but we kept going. So Kai and I, when we first started our podcast, we're like, we really need to be intentional about the coffee shops that, or coffee companies that we want to connect to, because we have a strong mission too, right? Like we want to provide high quality content for our community. So I came across this coffee shop. So we're like, okay, Kai, we're gonna set up this meeting. Oh my God, it gets me really angry just thinking about it. And this was a meeting before yours.
Okay.
So it's almost like you came in. So we met with this coffee company and they have a coffee shop. So Kai and I are meeting and we're talking, we're talking about our story, our mission statement. And the guy was like, I don't know about the whole mental health thing. I don't, and I'm
All
like,
right.
they were a mental health podcast. He's like, I don't know. And we had some alternative healers just because it's more than just therapy, right? Or even our cultura, we talk about other healers.
Yeah.
So we talked about that. And he's like, I don't know. I pray for people like that, for people who come to my shop like that. And I was cringing the whole time. And this is a white male.
Oh man.
And, we have two women of color on the Zoom interview. And I'm like, oh, I felt so discouraged. So, we were trying to wrap it up. And he's kind of like, really not being present during the meeting. And this is our first coffee shop. So I'm anxious and I'm nervous. I'm like, we need that win. So we got off and I called Kai and I was like, Kai, what are we going to do here? Like, are we going to stop or like, what are we doing here? Because this was I cried.
Yeah,
I
no.
cried. I was angry. And I'm like, this goes completely against what our podcast is about. The story behind the coffee. Like, coffee hits home for me. It goes back to my abuelita, goes back to my family, my culture, um, my community. And I was like, no. So, you know what? I was like, I had to regroup and I went online and I was like, I'm going to be very intentional for who I look up, like for coffee shop. And then you came up and you're like the complete opposite. I was like, I was at my mom's house and I'm gonna cry because I cried. I was like, Kai, Daniel's the complete opposite of this. I'm like, this, like, he literally matches the mission of our podcast, of what we want to offer. He's helping women in Latin America. So thank you, Daniel, for you were one of the things that kept me going. So
Appreciate
after
that.
that, I'm like, okay, no, like we have to find coffee shops or coffee companies that match the same vibe, the same energy, and you do that. So I want to just thank you for that. And
Appreciate
so
that.
I can really resonate with that story because it doesn't feel good.
At all.
Like
Punching hurts.
it hurts like a lot. It hurt
Yeah.
I was like, what? I was literally like, I disconnected. I was like, what
Yeah.
the hell is that?
Yeah, it's a horrible feeling, and and it's terrible that we have to go through that, but I mean, it's again, it's fuel for the fire, you know?
Yeah.
That's yeah, I mean, there's been countless times where I literally and metaphorically cried in the corner, in the boxing corner, in between rounds. And then just like entrepreneurship where I just, I sat like there'd be days where there was nothing, like no customers whatsoever, and the bills don't stop. And I would just lock up and I just cry, just cry it out. And then other times in boxing where it's just like I'm trying to catch the person and I'm getting hit, I'm fighting a ghost, I'm getting hit and nothing, and I just get back to my corner and I just cry, and what my dad would do, and this was his comforting thing, but my dad he would get water, the water bottle, he'd put it on my head so all the water would fall. So he's like, people don't know you're crying. I'm like, all right, bro, it works that way too. But yeah, it's things like that where it's just we deal with these kinds of things, and we have to go through that, and it's a terrifying feeling. The most for me is that knowing that my son's gonna have to one day
Exactly.
experience like downfalls and punches like that and stuff, because Cause I just remember when I just hold him and he's just so delicate, and I'm like, man, like I remember that was a cloud, and a train that ran through my mind all the time. Like I was just holding him and I was like, man, like he's gonna like experience this and like heartbreak, and then
Yes.
he's gonna, and then I remember everyone, like the wildest thing ever, and when my girlfriend was pregnant, because I'd bring her to the gym with me because I was still trained, and everyone would be like, "Oh, like," they'd be like, Is he gonna box? He's gonna box 'cause he's a boy." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, he's gonna box. He's gonna box. He's gonna box. He's gonna be just like me." And then he's born, and then I'm holding him, and I'm just like,
You're
man.
not boxing.
I was like, man, I was just like, oh my, like everything that I talked about, everything I said, I'm like, man, he's not even gonna ride a scooter, bro. Like, no, he's tiny, And so, and he starts getting older, and then as he's older, obviously he shows, and it's super awesome and then this ties again to like the mental
Mhm.
health and everything, where it's just like, my son, I gave his middle name is my dad's name. It's Isidro. I've always loved that name, and I've always loved, honored, and respected my dad. So I was like, for sure, there's a name he's gonna have. So the more I see him, like I just see my father so much, and I'm just like, man, like it's just so awesome to see that, because like he acts like them, he talks like him, he's watching, like there was one time we took him to get some ice cream, and he was sitting next to my dad, and they were sitting the exact same way, and they were like, even my dad was like, what, like like he doesn't hang around me that much to know it's like that's how, so we were all just like amazed looking at him. And then I was just like, man, like in that sense, like it motivates me even more, because it's just like, like knowing the story that my dad didn't have such a good father. It's just like, all right, like now I get to see what my dad would have been like if hopefully I'm a good dad, but it's to see if he was like, raised through a good father, and good. And I see my dad with my son, and it's just like it's just so awesome seeing him like that, like seeing my dad so vulnerable, like
Isn't it so different? My parents are the
yeah.
same way now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I remember, like I would even ask my mom. I'd be like, "Hey, was my dad like that with me when I was a baby?" And mom was like,
No.
kind of." Like she's just like, my mom's just so like warm hearted, so she don't want to say. She's like, kind of." But then I see him, like when my son would start to learn to crawl, like my dad would get on the floor and do these goofy faces, and I'm just like, "Who is this man, bro?" Like, But it's so cool seeing that, and then seeing that whole situation where like it helps me mentally now to know, like that also what also helped was this, like, oh, my dad he's a person, he's a human, and it took like again, like all these experiences as well, because he has his shop, and I'm pretty sure he won't tell us, but I'm pretty sure there was days where he locked up and cried. I'm pretty sure there's days where he got home and he had, there's five of us in total. I'm sure he got home and he was like, how am I gonna feed them all, And so like it that like taking that back and like seeing it kind of like helped heal like the younger me. Like it was just like, okay, like it wasn't that my dad was being mean and wanted me to go fight kids. It was like my dad was doing this because he wanted to build my confidence. My dad was doing this because this was all he knew, And so like it also helped like my relationship like with my father. Like to be like, hey, it still takes some time to talk man to man. It's still kind of weird, you know, but it's like it's something that's slowly coming together, where it's just like, all right. And then that's also helping me be, again, an entrepreneur and a father, because now I can ask my dad and just be like, hey, like I'm not scared to ask him, because I'm not scared to be judged by him. Like,
There's like a level of trust now
yeah,
and
exactly.
safety.
Exactly. Because before, my dad used to be very strict and very, like most Latino fathers, like criticism just all around, and stuff like that. So then now that there's that, now I understand them and he understands me, and we know we're in the same situation in a lot of ways. Now I'm just kind of be like, hey, like I messed up here. I didn't do this right. I didn't do this. Like how can I get out of this? And he helps me. So it's fun situations.
Yeah, I really love how I think during this episode we're really humanizing too the entrepreneurship journey. Cuz yeah, I think that it requires a lot of transparency. It's just a lot of vulnerability, right? A lot of punches, a lot of
Yeah.
tears, a lot of hurt feelings, but also like we got to keep going. Like um It is. It's a beautiful thing. Entrepreneurship is very beautiful, but there's this backstory of it being very difficult sometimes too,
Yeah,
especially being
definitely.
parents.
And that's what doesn't get really shown in the limelight.
And I think that's why I really wanted you to be a part of this episode, Daniel, because that's what I want to talk about, right? Like people need to hear our story.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, because I was also like bringing up that whole the entrepreneurship situation. Like I was kind of I would say like tricked into the I guess you would say the Americanized entrepreneurship where it's just
Mm.
like you don't have to, you don't have to go to school and you don't have to like do this. You can you know what I'm saying? Like it's just
Yeah.
like very like, you can literally come from the bottom to the top and then you realize this guy like owned like land and somewhere and it made millions and he just like there's very like
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yes.
so it's like weird. And then that was another thing too, like I had there's another business owner where I had idolized. And then I had well, I don't want to give too much detail, but I had worked for him for some time. And then I was like, chatting with him, stuff like that. He was a cool dude. And I did not realize how much money homie came from. And I'm just like, bro, I thought you were me. Like I thought we were, And so I would hear his story and then like the schools that he graduated from because the money he came from and the connections and I was like, bro, like oh man, like I was following your footsteps, but I don't qualify, bro.
No.
Like and so like you start seeing these things and things like they say like cracks end up in the gilded mask where you start seeing like, oh man, like this isn't how I thought it would be. And again with the vulnerability, like everyone's like this tough guy, like Steve Jobs was this mean dude, Elon Musk makes people sleep in the office, and that's how you have to be. Like and then you realize like when you start coming across people that are entrepreneurs, you see like how broken these people are, and you see about how like broken in the sense where they need a hug, like broken in the sense where it's just like they're trying to manage everything, and you're just like you see the Instagram and you're just like, oh, these guys are cool, or this
It's
and
like
that.
the perfect picture, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And you post that and they post that and you see it and then you like talk to them and they're just like, yeah, bro, like my car got repoed. And I'm like, oh my God, bro. But you have 40,000 followers,
Yes.
like
No,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Like you start seeing these things, but then people are so good at kind of projecting what you want to see. I mean, what they want you to see. And so you fall into that where it's just like, oh, like, I'm pretty sure people saw me and they're just like, "Oh, like, it shouldn't be that hard to open up a coffee shop." But
Yeah.
then they didn't see me crying in the bag.
No, exactly. And I get that a lot from my colleagues or even friends. Like, you seem to always have it together. And I'm like, no. I'm
Yeah.
like, you don't know the amount of phone calls, like late night calls and staying up till 1 in the morning trying to work on projects. It's not a beautiful no. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. That's why I drink coffee. Literally, this is why I drink coffee in the morning. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel you on that. And yeah, and then you start seeing like when you start getting into the because a majority of us, especially where I come from, we're not educated in finances,
Yeah.
personal finances, let alone business finances.
Mhm.
So then you start seeing like the money coming in because when you work somewhere, but then later on you start looking at the books and you're just like, oh man, like that's expensive,
Mhm.
and a good example is at my dad's shop. Like you'll see a car like a customer pays like $3,000, and you're just like, oh, the $3,000 in hand, it feels good. But then you're like, it was an engine replacement, and the engine was like 2 grand, and you're just like, oh man, like we worked all that much for like we made a grand in like a month and a half, like stuff like that,
Mhm.
where it starts spilling into that, and um there's a lot of these illusions that people start falling into, and it's dangerous again for like mental health, because people are just like myself included, where you just like, I'm gonna open up doors and I'm just gonna be able to feed myself, my family, put a roof over my son's head. And then you realize opening up the doors sets you back some time, and now you just have to scramble and kind of figure everything out.
Dana, do you remember when we met for that Zoom meeting, what you told me when I asked you to, work with me and you vowed to do something as when you opened up your coffee shop?
I don't I had a lot of punches to
Yeah,
the
you
head, I
did,
don't
you
remember.
did. No, you said you vowed to help any Latino business that
Oh,
comes
definitely.
your way,
Right.
and I was like, "Wow, that's big." Because 'cause you're like, "I know what it feels like for somebody not to believe in you," and
Yeah.
I vowed that I would do that if somebody came my way.
Definitely. I still try and do that. I mean, it's sad that there's a lot of what we call them gatekeepers, and they hold the information and they do that. But I've been approached by so many Latino and Latina entrepreneurs, and like they're so like you can tell in the way that it's written, like they're expecting a no, and I'll message them back, and they're just like, oh my god, like how can I speak to Daniel or Cielito? And I'm like, oh, it's me, bro. Like, we're talking, and then it blows their mind. But yeah, I mean, like I really like helping Latino entrepreneurs and Latina entrepreneurs because it's just again, like you said, like I've been there, and it's horrible. It's a really bad feeling, and it's even worse to go through that feeling alone. So like if there's anyone that I can help, I in an instant, like no hesitation. Sometimes I do drown myself because I help people a little too much. But yeah, like I really like doing that, and I really like helping them because they you see it, right? Like you see their faces light up, if only for like a moment, but you see that that sparkle in their eye was just like, oh, this was worth it, or
Mhm.
this was it, or this was that. Because I mean, no one really helped me. Like the person I idolized, I texted him when I opened up shop and my number was blocked. Yeah, like straight up. And then the managers of his shops would come in and they would report to him. And it's like, man, like, it's crazy. But yeah, but I know the feeling of again, like being backstabbed, and the feeling of, not having like that support, or not having anyone that, or really like anyone that understands you. Sometimes it's not even like in a bad way. Like, and with me with the coffee shop, I didn't really have anyone to support me, like in the sense where like with business advice or emotional advice. Cause I'm again, like my dad, he owns a mechanic shop. Like he changes oil filters, I change coffee filters. It's a totally different thing. You,
Totally.
you know? So it's like it was he would help me like okay, like with the things that kind of were universal, manage the expenses, be careful with this, with the ins, the outs, stuff like that. But it's just like, I like, who am I gonna run to and be like, hey man, like a customer ordered like 20 lattes with oat milk and I forgot the milk. Everyone's gonna be like, oh, that's funny. And I'm like, not to me, bro. It's not gonna
No,
be funny in a while.
I think you're bringing up a good point because if I tie it back to my own experience of being an entrepreneur, I say my parents are entrepreneurs themselves, Daniel, but very different business. They do like real estate and they own properties. I help people with their mental health.
Yeah.
And so same with me, right? Like they were able to talk to me about money and maybe the structure of my business, but um, I think what helped me was my community, really building my community with like Latina therapists and business owners. Really being able to lean on them because I didn't know anything about. I went to grad school, but they didn't teach us about business.
Yeah.
Nobody teaches you like you said, opening up a business account, getting a business license. So you really, I don't know if you agree with that, but building your community too.
Yeah, that's also key. There was a lot of well, a lot of people in the coffee community, in the community regardless. Like when with the coffee shop with Cielito, when it came about building community, the way that I wanted to show people that I came in peace was hosting just because the space used to be big before. It was like 1,500 square feet. It was
Wow.
huge, and so I would open it and just like tell people like, hey, like free art shows, like just trying different things, and through there you would learn other Latino struggles or other struggles of people in those kinds of neighborhoods, because it's like I remember I threw my first art show and everyone was asking like, how much do I pay you, how much do I pay, and I'm like, it's free. I need people. So it's free. Like just buy the coffee, or tell people to buy coffee, whatever, but like your art's gonna be free on the walls for as long as it need be. And they would tell me that like, they had to travel all the way to downtown if they wanted their spot in an art space, and they would pay like 300, 400, sometimes, and that would be like sometimes they were so cutthroat with rent, like 300 wasn't something that they were able to dispose. So I would learn through that, and I'd be like, oh man, like people are suffering all throughout, and then I would have music shows, and you'd see these talent, and like they didn't know where to go, they didn't have any school. And then I would have I used to have outlets like just for students to study and to charge the stuff. And there would be a bunch of students, and I talk to them, and you would just see that like the soul was gone from their eye. Like they're just like, dude, I just got out of work, and like you're the only coffee shop open, and like I need to like turn this in, and you're just like, man, like, so you start seeing that, and that again, like how many people like just need a hug, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, how much people
Yeah.
just need like someone to
Just to feel
listen to.
understood.
Yeah, like I remember there was this one guy, and his name was Chris, and he would sit there and he would just like study all the time. And I was bored because he was like the only one there. So I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go like, offer him another drink and then just sit and chat with him. And this man went for like miles, just talked to me about like, how he was like homeless for some time, like going to like I think to Berkeley, and then he came back because it was just like all this stuff. And like he was just talking to me, and I was like, bro, like he just needed an ear, man. Like, like
So, Dan, you didn't only own a coffee shop, but you were a therapist too.
I guess so, yeah.
Another
Yeah,
set of skills that you have.
I don't think I was very good at it. I was super fidgety and stuff like that. And then they would tell me something, and I'd be like, "Damn!" And I don't think a therapist can say that. But yeah, but I was a street therapist, I guess we could
There
say.
you go. But Daniel, no, I really appreciate all, the quality of our conversation. You shared so many great things. I was going to ask in the beginning and I didn't get to, but here on Cafecito y Calidad, we drink really great coffee while having good quality conversations. I didn't even ask you, how do you take your coffee?
Oh, just black. Yeah, just or
Ah,
maybe like a little cortadito.
ah,
Cortadito if I'm feeling fancy, but just black
oh.
coffee.
Yeah. Well, I see all the videos that you have on Instagram. Now
Mm.
you're actually showing people how to make it. I made your cold brew. Your
Oh,
café de
do you like
olla.
it?
Wonderful. And I used your El Salvador coffee.
Yeah.
Delicious.
I'm glad. The
Yeah.
masapan one is next.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm waiting for it.
Yeah. I keep trying, but I just eat all the masapanes before
They're
it gets
delicious.
I love them. Yeah.
I used to eat them at the family parties, the fiestas,
Yeah.
like the piñatas.
Yeah. I will. I because we were making because we used the masapan. Well, in the shop, we used to use the full masapan to make the drink. I've got like the insane super Latino talent now where I can open it fast without breaking the masapan.
No,
That
that's like that deserves a gold star
that's
because
a
I can't even do that.
I'm an urban legend in my hood now. Just the
Dang.
masapan guy.
Dang. Well, can you let our audience know too? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so it's El Cielito Cafe on Instagram. On TikTok, I think because that one was supposed to be a little bit more like not business, just more personal, goofy stuff. So that one's I think your boy Cielito.
Hey, there you go.
It's embarrassing saying that out loud. It was cool typing
Come.
it.
Say it
Yeah,
with some enthusiasm, Daniel.
your boy Cielito.
Hey.
And then El Cielito Cafe. And then you can order coffee online at elcielitocafe.com/store. And also, oh yeah, merch too. Like we have sweaters. We're coming out with shirts. Um yeah, all kinds of
I'm
stuff.
waiting for the El Salvador sweater you told me about.
Oh, I have it. Yeah, I
Oh,
have
okay.
it. I'll bring it. I just need to iron it because
Uh,
it got kind of wrinkly.
no, well, thank you so much, Daniel. I really appreciate you coming, and I hope maybe we can invite you again sometime.
Definitely. I'm
Yeah,
always down.
great.